history or some biodata on Mr. Smith.
Oh.
Good evening, colleagues. I was asked to be brief, but I have 2 pages of bio here, but I'll try. In our series of entrepreneur and an entrepreneur, we have a most experienced person with us this evening. He's the first in this series of guest speakers that we'll be having. He has a long history of various experiences. His most recent being the Chief Customer Service Officer at Digicel. He was a chairman of the Digicel Foundation. He was also the Director of Marketing. Other achievements include leading the marketing team that was responsible for Digicel's launch in Jamaica, founding chairman of Digicel Foundation. A brief synopsis of his professional role includes leadership role in demand side of DNG. He was the first managing director at PAG Benjamin, marketing manager at Denon Geddes, marketing director of Colgate Palmolive. And I'm really cutting this short. He serves on several boards, including chairman for Digicel Foundation, member of the board of Mona School of Business, member of the board of trustees of UTech Foundation, members of the Governor General's King's House Development Committee. Truly, you can see he has a vast amount of wealth and experience to share with us. So please join me in welcoming Mr. Harry Smith.
Thank you. Let me just clarify. She said I have a vast amount of wealth and experience. It's 2 different things. She meant wealth of experience. It's an anecdotal fact that Digicel has a greater top-of-mind awareness than Coca-Cola or McDonald's in Jamaica. Now, that statement normally surprises visiting bankers and executives from especially North American markets, that could ever be. Part of why I think I was invited here this evening is to share a bit of that journey. So what we'll be looking at is in the beginning. That's what I think from the academic side you would call the idea generation phase. Then entering the market, where we looked at the opportunity identification and development, as well as, very importantly, financing that dream. Share with you some of our launch strategies and what went on in the minds of the people involved. Then what we did to become the #1 brand in Jamaica. And then hopefully you will participate in the latter section, which is where I summarize and there's an area for discussion. This is what the Caribbean looked like in 1999. The blue dots indicates where Cable Wireless had operations. Straight monopoly. That's how it looks now. Okay? Just 7 years later. So we ask, how did a group of Irish investors end up being the market leaders of mobile communications, of the mobile communication business in the Caribbean? That's what this short talk is about. So what I'm going to do actually is talk about the main person behind it, which is Dennis O'Brien. And I'm not going to read everything on his slide because you can find it on the Digicel website. But by and large, he, to me, is the entrepreneur that made it all happen. As chairman of the board, where I was management, some people may call it terror. A very charming man, but in the business environment, hard-nosed, and it filtered down. He has businesses in telecommunications, in golf, can't play anything, but he has been interested in it. Owns a number of radio stations across Europe, Poland, Ireland, some of the former USSR countries, aircraft leasing, and leisure sector. He made his money really from the sale of ESAT Telecom, which was like let's say the major telecommunications company in Ireland at that time, selling it to British Telecom for 2.4 billion euros. He then had all this money and didn't know what to do with it, even though he had all these leisure opportunities. he looked at, well, I get into into what the opportunity identification was, but so I'll just skip that for the time being. But he established Digicel, and now we have a business across the Caribbean, Central America, South America, and in fact, even in the South Pacific. What is also important to him, and he always likes to talk about, is his philanthropy. He, in fact, was the first non-American chairman of the Special Olympics, and the Games were held in Ireland in 2003. And he has formed his own company, own foundation to identify and assist projects in Ireland, which help to alleviate disadvantaged communities. And we'll come back to how that impacted on even Digicel's foundation in Jamaica. He is qualified. He has a BA and an MBA from Boston College. So as I said, he had all this money, but there were very few opportunities, because all the European markets had multiple operators in telecommunications. But he knew that where there was a monopoly, there was opportunity to break it and to launch a competitive operation. In 1999, the telecommunications market, for those of us young enough to remember, was not liberalized. In fact, it led to poor penetration of access to telephones. It was only 30%. What that really did was it lagged international benchmarks, and it retarded the growth of the country and emphasized the digital divide that people may speak about. Dennis, however, knew that based on global trends, that was not sustainable, because it created pent-up demand and frustration with incumbents. So his strategy was to identify wherever in the world this model existed and to drive deregulation and break the monopolistic culture. And the Caribbean obviously was one such region. It also coincided with Minister Paul's desire to liberalize the industry. I remember the fight he had with I think it was maybe called TOJ, I don't know. Anyway, cable wires at that time. As I said, sometimes governments do have foresight. Dennis actually paid $47 million in 2000 for the license. And the way it was paid for and the way I agreed to that price was typical Irish. He was in Ireland, and he had a surrogate here in Jamaica at the bid that was going on for the license. They were in a bar back in Ireland. The guy kept telling them where the price had gotten to. And eventually they agreed on, well, he said, the price is now 47, and then he said, okay, go for it. And they got it. The guy then called him back and said, yeah, we have the license. And then it's almost like a car run down a dog run down a car. When you catch it, what you do with it? That was his dilemma. Because at that time he had no clue. I don't think I'd ever been to Jamaica. That was the environment in which Digicel was formed, in a bar a couple thousand miles away. Then he began to look at things like the external information that people had about Jamaica. And that slide graphically demonstrates how mad he was, because that's the GDP growth at that time, negative growth, and he wanted to launch a mobile operation in Jamaica. But he knew, even though the official statistics, by the way, when he was launching in Haiti, it looked worse. So by then he realized not to trust just listening to official statistics. But he did know that the service was poor and expensive. The technology was old. You remember that Cable Wireless at that time used the TDMA network, which was old in terms of global telecoms. It didn't allow for good roaming. People couldn't travel and roam in many countries. At that time, GSM was responsible for over 70% of the world's roaming revenue. There was inefficiency because the government actually guaranteed Cable Wireless profits in their license. But when we spoke to consumers, realized, and that's why I mentioned underground research, when we spoke to consumers, realized that there was an opportunity that belied all these statistics that we saw. People were complaining about cloning. Remember when you had mobile phones and there was this cloning? So the security of your calls, prices, there was no choice. They used to have phones called Sketel phones, remember those? All right? And coverage was poor. You just knew, for example, where not to go and stamp and try and make a call. Moby Hip Strip was one, and of course Flatbridge was another. So the mistake that they made was that they allowed what should be an exciting and popular category to be commoditized and compromised. They had no branding, no brand values, and there was a lot of distrust and complicated tariffs in terms of how you paid for the services. So the opportunity, therefore, was to develop a true brand identity, secure the high ground, in other words, realize I'm not saying go up against them, and develop a consumer-based brand equity. So that was what the market looked like in 2000. Outdated technology, high prices, inefficient service. I remember when you're going to pay your bill, you had to give up the whole morning. You just knew it was going to take you almost half a day just to pay your bill. Job marketing, very little customer interaction, poorless disadvantaged customers, very little products or innovation, because remember I mentioned that they didn't have the GSM network, which was where a lot of the new things in mobile was coming from, and it was poor and expensive. Then GSL launched in 2001. And already began to see, it was not deliberate. Theirs was drab, and this is bright. It was coincidental, okay? You're supposed to say sure. Right, so came with exciting new products. First thing we did was made sure that we had unbeatable coverage. And from day one, that was a differentiator. We subsidized handsets to make them affordable to everyone, because we knew that networks are not supposed to be the handset business. You make your money by selling airtime. So, in fact, even to this day, when this sells a phone, they actually lose money on it, because they know what they'll do is make the money back on you using the phone. Something Cari-Med could have worked out longer and didn't. Innovative event executions. Customer care became 24 hours and not just when the office was open. High impact marketing. Simple pricing. And the important thing at this point is to mention the energetic and task-driven employees. That was a big thing because of our hiring policy at that time. What we went for at launch was what we call best in class. Only 25% of the staff at launch knew anything about telecommunications. What we went for was aptitude and their excellence. The accountants didn't have to come from a telecommunications background. We just need to know they were good. If you're a marketing person, we just need to know you're good. We'll teach you telecoms. So that was the approach. It also required youth. When I was there, the average age of the staff, all the staff, as we speak, is about 26, 27 of the DSL staff. Now that I'm gone, I think it has dropped to about 22. So it's very young, energetic. A lot of these people would never have seen a management role working anywhere else. So we also created, therefore, internal opportunities and made them, therefore, bond and identify with the company. People were working long hours, not because they were required to, but because they wanted to. Brand identification vision was very simple. Position DSL as a bold, cutting-edge, mass-market brand with particular appeal to the youth segment of the market. I say that because if you're going to do a mass product in Jamaica, one has to be cognizant of the fact that 60% of the population is below 30. So therefore, you have to be relevant. If you remember the mobile position back then of Cari-Med was basically talking only to corporate people, to the older people. There was very little appeal, therefore, to the younger people. So they left that market just open for us to take over. So at launch, what we do, first thing we decided to do things differently. When we launched on that night in April 18th, 2001, we had satellite link up with Montego Bay and Kingston because we wanted to make a statement that Kingston was not Jamaica. So the launch of such an important service, we thought it was important from a strategic position point of view to make Mobe realize that we were going to do things different. So we linked both cities. For the first time, we had a media roadblock. We bought every radio station at the turn-on time, so nobody could miss the story. All right? And back then, media was relatively cheap. They've since gotten smart. All right? We use youth as the imagery. Remember that at that time, Jody and I just won Scripps Award, and McCohen, remember his surname, but he was some young IT genius. So, yeah, Blake Hanna, that's correct. Barbara Blake Hanna's son. So those were the people that we used in terms of the imagery, because we're saying that this is going to be a young, vibrant company talking to young people. So it was important in even the choice of people that we use to turn on the network. So as I said, get the strategy right, hire the right people. You notice I'm reinforcing that because that's important. And differentiate from day one. And it has a relevant differentiation. It can't be just differentiate for the hell of being different. So we came with new technology, but we didn't talk technology. We came with a new type of billing, per second billing, which, by the way, eventually the competition adopted. We began to say it's unfair for somebody to speak for 30 seconds, 15 seconds, and pay for 60. So we began to appeal to that sort of thought in the consumer's mind that they're being ripped off without saying it. As I said, the coverage was there. Choice of handsets. All of a sudden, you could choose anything. And whether you're on prepaid or postpaid, you could have the same fancy phone. Our colors were, the choice of logo, for example, was deliberate. We deliberately didn't want to look like a corporate body. So that simple lettering with 2 colors, very uncorporate at that time, but we decided that was how we were going to stand out. And as I say, we didn't sell technology, but saw it as a lifestyle brand and spoke the language of the ordinary consumer. Again, I go back to research. We listened to the consumers, not the shareholders, not the neighbors, which is why they had local people to do the marketing, because they realized that you can't just bring in McDonald's, Coke, Budweiser. All these brands have tended to try and bring their model and plant it in Jamaica and think it will work. It isn't going to work. So we had to talk the language of the people. We found out what people wanted from their mobile operator, and from day one, we did what we call an ongoing tracker. I'll come back to how that works. But what we do is we track people's attitude to your brand continuously, and the competitions, because the attitudes change before the behavior changes, you know. By the time your sales has dropped, it's because the behavior has changed, but the attitude changed months before. So if you can do an intervention before the attitude becomes behavior, then you can prevent a slide or increase your business. And of course, we talk about their use and attitude to the brands every 2 years. In terms of media strategy, media presence drives preference, and we knew that. What it also does is that it imbues the brand or your brand with confidence. So we selected the media and then dominated it. So we use TV, radio, and outdoor to communicate imagery and brand values, and then more detailed information you put in print where people can read. A lot of mistakes people make is that you load your advertising, especially the radio, with too much information, a lot of numbers. People